Welcome to this explainer. Today we aren't just looking at some annoying little nuisance of the night. We're investigating a massive, full-system biological mystery that's just waiting to be decoded. We're going to reveal the hidden operating system governing human sleep, your energy, and your emotional resilience. Because frankly, insomnia isn't just about missing out on rest. It's a profound signal from an invisible biological force that's actively shaping your entire life. Let's get into it.
So, let's start with a really frustrating paradox. Why is it that the harder we fight for sleep, the more elusive it actually becomes? I mean, it's incredibly annoying, right? But it's actually an evolutionary quirk. You see, the harder we try to force ourselves to sleep, the more we signal to our brain that there's a problem. We accidentally trigger the exact biological stress responses designed to prevent sleep when we're in danger.
And that brings us to our first major paradigm shift. Listen to this. Insomnia is not a sleep disorder. It's actually a 24-hour waking disorder. It's a multi-system dysfunction where your body's sympathetic nervous system is essentially trapped. It is locked in a continuous 24-hour state of high alert. So you aren't actually failing to sleep. Your body is just succeeding at staying awake, all because it's caught in what researchers call chronic hyperarousal.
And the hidden consequence of this 24-hour hyperarousal? Well, it's pretty staggering. Individuals dealing with severe, objective physiological hyperarousal have a 3.27 times higher risk of developing hypertension. Over 3 times the risk. This just goes to show how deeply interconnected our biological systems really are. The inability to switch off your brain at night places a massive, sustained demand on your heart and cardiovascular system. It's a perfect example of how sleep influences biology and how biology directly influences your long-term health trajectory.
All right, Section 1, the hyperarousal operating system, the invisible battle in the brain. You know that terrible frustration of just tossing and turning? That is actually a profound physical signal that your nervous system is literally at war with itself. Let's look at the mechanics. In normal sleep, your brain's sleep-promoting system, the VLPO pathways, release calming neurotransmitters like GABA to actively shut down your arousal networks. It's like applying the brakes. But with insomnia, we see evening neural overdrive. The wake-promoting ARS pathways absolutely hyperactivate. Surges of cortisol, orexin, and noradrenaline completely hijack your brain's ability to transition. The braking system gets completely overpowered by the accelerator.
And across this beautiful operating system, critical regions just start malfunctioning. First, the pons fails to deactivate, which physically blocks your descent into deep sleep. Then, your thalamic gates stay wide open, letting every little pin drop bypass the filter, which is why you might feel like such a light sleeper. Meanwhile, your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is firing on all cylinders, driving that endless mental rumination, while the orbitofrontal cortex actually powers down, robbing you of the ability to just disengage. We even see structural changes in the amygdala, literally locking you into a state of sensory vulnerability and high emotional reactivity.
Now, if we look at the clinical data, it proves that insomnia systemically alters a human being. Transitioning from normal sleep to acute insomnia triggers massive spikes across the board. Perceived stress rockets upward. Dysfunctional beliefs about sleep skyrocket. We're not just talking about lost hours of rest here. This condition actively alters your baseline anxiety and deeply held cognitive beliefs. It is literally a full-body distress signal.
Moving on to Section 2, the 3P disease framework, how stress becomes a chronic loop.
So how does a temporary problem, like a few bad nights before a big presentation, morph into this self-sustaining biological loop? Well, the famous Spielman 3P model maps out a really clear timeline. First up, you have predisposing factors. Maybe you're genetically wired to be a bit more alert, or you just have trait-level worry. Then a trigger hits, a precipitating factor, like job loss, grief, maybe having a new baby. That causes the acute sleeplessness. But here is the massive revelation. It is the third P, the perpetuating factors that actually trap us. The compensatory behaviors we invent to try and fix the sleep problem, like spending way too much time in bed trying to force it, those are the exact things that cement the disease into a chronic state.
Which leads us to an absolutely crucial concept, cognitive activation syndrome, or CAS. Think of this as a metacognitive trap. Primary arousal is simply having a thought about not sleeping, but secondary arousal, that metacognitive layer, is how you react to that thought. It's your emotional attachment, your fear of how tired you'll be tomorrow, your panic every time you look at the clock. This secondary distress acts like absolute gasoline on the fire of your nervous system. And this metacognitive trap really manifests in our everyday behavior. We try to suppress intrusive thoughts. We lie in bed for 10 hours hoping to scrape together 6 hours of sleep. We stare at the clock. We catastrophize about how totally ruined tomorrow is going to be. I'm sure a lot of you are sitting there thinking, wow, this explains so much. Because every single one of these desperate attempts to control sleep is actually fueling the exact cognitive arousal that biologically prevents it.
Section 3. The restless REM trap, the hidden accumulation of emotional tone.
To uncover one of the most profound and frankly invisible consequences of disrupted sleep, we have to look at how we process emotional distress. Your brain has this incredible evolutionary overnight therapy session called REM sleep. Under healthy conditions, REM sleep consolidates your memories while brilliantly stripping away the painful emotional charge attached to them. But the micro-arousals of insomnia, they break this mechanism. Fragmented, restless REM sleep fails to strip that affective charge, which traps yesterday's distress right inside your nervous system today.
And the National Academy of Sciences has revealed a genuinely stunning finding on this. Over 62% of the link between restless REM sleep and chronic hyperarousal is specifically caused by the brain's inability to dissolve long-lasting emotional distress overnight. Just take a second to really think about that. The hyperarousal keeping you awake isn't just physical energy, it is the literal accumulation of unresolved emotional weight.
The consequences of this accumulation are absolutely massive. When we fail to process complex, self-conscious emotions like shame and guilt overnight, our daytime baseline anxiety naturally rises. We lose that crucial prefrontal top-down regulation over our amygdala. And, critically, it dramatically increases our vulnerability to affective psychiatric disorders like depression. This is exactly where we see how deeply sleep influences emotions, and how those emotions can literally change the trajectory of an entire human life.
All right, our final segment, Section 4, the paradoxical cure, hacking the attention-intention-effort pathway.
So how on earth do we fix a system that breaks further the harder we try to fix it? Well, Oxford professor Colin Espy provides the key. He says, by attempting to control the sleep process, you usually interfere with it. Sleep is an involuntary process. That right there is the ultimate truth of our biology. Sleep is an automatic surrender. It's not a voluntary achievement you can just capture by force.
And that brings us to something called paradoxical intention. Derived from Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, this psychotherapeutic technique basically instructs the brain to do the exact opposite of what it's terrified of failing at. By explicitly intending to stay awake, you instantly disarm your hyperarousal threat system. You completely neutralize what scientists call the attention-intention-effort pathway.
So, here is exactly how you execute this biological hack. You lie in bed, in the dark, with your eyes wide open. You actively relinquish all effort and desire to fall asleep. Just tell yourself, I am genuinely going to stay awake just a little longer. By giving up control, by eliminating the performance anxiety of, I have to sleep right now, you paradoxically allow your brain's natural involuntary de-arousal mechanisms to finally take the wheel. I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought to ponder. If the literal key to unlocking the restorative power of sleep is to completely surrender control, what other parts of your biology, your stress, your emotional resilience, are you breaking by trying too hard to fix them? Understanding your body's hidden operating manual really does change everything. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this changes how you see your sleep and yourself tonight.